out. And they say Greenpeace included by police in terror lists. So what exactly are they saying about this?
So, well, as it says, it's fairly straightforward, is that as part of counter-terrorism measures, police have been distributing documents to school staff, medical staff, that sort of thing, to look not specifically for Greenpeace membership. I think we can all agree that to suggest that Greenpeace themselves were a terrorist organization in the same way as, the Islamic State, that would be going a little far. But it's more about the prevent strategy. It's more about looking for signs of radicalism in ideologies that might be espoused in an offhand way in the classroom, or that you might overhear, that might perhaps lead to something a little bit deeper. I think it's interesting, for example, that Greenpeace are included on this list, having previously, a few weeks ago, heard Extinction Rebellion, who it would be wrong to call them, I think, violent protesters, but certainly perhaps interventionists.
Disruptive.
Yes, perhaps a little more active than your average environmental protest. They too have been considered being classified as an extremist organization, if not a terrorist organization. But I found it very curious, given that this happened on the same day that it was announced that Hezbollah, both the military wing and the political wing, had been deemed a terrorist organization. I don't think it's not related, but I just thought it was very curious that these two stories come out at the same time, that this very important issue, that of climate change and environmental protection, can be seen to be that big a problem that people are being talked about potentially in the same breath as actual terrorist organizations that we are recognizing. But I think Susie mentioned something earlier about the incel community.
Well, yes, and just before we go on to that, I'll come on to that in just a moment. I delved a little bit further into the article, and it does say here, police insist the guide, that one of these documents that these organisations are mentioned in, isn't meant to portray all the groups that it features as extremist and thus needing to be reported on. They said it's meant to boost understanding of the signs and symbols people may come across, and they say not all the signs and symbols noted within the document are of counter-terrorism interest.
The thing about PREVENT is that it's really wide-ranging in terms of what it's looking for. So last week we had Extinction Rebellion being on a list of organisations that should be reported to PREVENT, which the Home Office then said was a mistake, and that shouldn't have been there. And here we have a document which has been given out to police to help them identify groups on their day-to-day activities. So Greenpeace is a group, CND, PETA are groups, people who are involved in these groups, and it may well be that police officers don't know what the difference between all of them and they want that defined. But I am aware, and I spoke to Home Office about this earlier on, although it's probably not going to make a story for a newspaper, they're also using examples of things like incels, men who are involuntary celibates and call themselves incels and have an online community. Perhaps they're a bit angry with women in particular, but are expressing aggressive feelings about other members of society. And because they seem to be more isolated in daily life, because they are forming online communities, because they are easily radicalized by an issue, it is one of the things which some people on PREVENT training have been told in context, that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Now, that doesn't mean that incel is a terror threat. It does mean that incels are the kind of people that PREVENT would like to know where they are and if they're going to grow up and be worse.
It's the sort of person that I think is at risk of being radicalized, not perhaps by that ideology, but by other ideologies. But one thing that I would say, given quite how much of an impact the debate about the climate is currently having, it is curious that all of these sort of, these conservation and green movements are being mentioned in these breaths, because, of course, one of the big angry things that lots of people are saying, especially young people, is nothing is being done, no action is being taken. Now, I'm not for a second saying you're about to see eco-terrorists on the streets, but that's the very curious way that they always frame it. Nothing is being done. And that's always the worry, is when rhetoric and talk turns into action. And we saw that with Extinction, moving from entirely, non-interventionist protests to actually something where they make themselves a nuisance. And that's the thing.
They themselves... It's a terror threat.
No, it's not.
And that's what's worrying, is that the net is very big here. And we don't have the resources, really. If you're casting a net wide enough to find out about people who are in Combat 18 and people for the ethical treatment of animals, and trying to find out which one of them is going to grow up to murder everybody, then I think, frankly, the police are going to have far too much to do. And you're going to be putting innocent people's names on a list.
We're running out of time. I just want to squeeze in one more story before the end. This is page 9 of the Mail. This is about Apple chargers and whether or not it could be the end of them. There's some push to try and make sure that the chargers are the same.
Great idea. Someone wants to make it clear that we don't need to keep getting a different charger every time we get a new phone. All phones, all devices must charge the same way. And unfortunately, it's going to happen in the European Parliament and the European Union. So we're all going to be having a booze cruise to buy our devices in France.
Brexiteer.
Well, of course, I'm a Brexiteer and I wish to take us back to 1783, so I'm entirely opposed to the idea of all technological devices. And I think that this is a fantastic thing, that our European friends will be addicted to their smartphones, whereas the rest of us will be having conversations with each other. Like how it ought to be, yes. Just like in the good old days where everybody wore double-breasted suits and had moustaches. Don't we miss those days?
Mine's coming on nice.
Okay, excellent. Susie
No.
Benedict, always good to see you both. Thanks
Well,
very
yeah.
much indeed. Do stay with us. Plenty more.
حاول
Smartphones, whereas the rest of us
تعطينا
will be
دقيقة واحدة
having
خلينا نسجل
conversations
بهاشم.
with each other. Like how it ought to be, yes. Just like in the good old days where everybody wore double-breasted suits and had moustaches. Don't we miss those days?
Mine's coming on nice.
Okay, excellent. Susie Benedict, always good to see you both. Thanks very much indeed.